Hello and welcome. Right, so today we're going to look at some of the theories on sex discrimination with the hope that this will help us understand why sex discrimination exists and persists. We will also see how gender classifications and gender roles reinforce sex discrimination. And then hopefully, if we understand this, we will see the need for the laws that we have in this area and maybe try to put an end to inequality. Right, so I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so we are looking at sex discrimination. And these are the areas that we will look at today. All right, so we look at the origin of sex discrimination, theoretical views on sex discrimination, linkages between gender classification, sex roles, and sex discrimination. All right, so just a brief history. Right, so throughout history and across societies, women have always faced discrimination in all areas of their lives. You know, they were viewed as less than human and that they had inferior brains and were irrational beings. So because of this, women were treated less than men. You know, they were legally placed under the authority of men, especially in marriages. She was treated as a minor with her husband having control of her and her property. Okay, and also a woman was not allowed to have, the right to the custody of her children. Right, so women were, because they were thought to be irrational beings, they were excluded from participating in politics. And it was believed that her natural and rightful place was at home, looking after her husband and her children. Then over time, through the women's suffrage movement, women were gradually granted rights to vote, but not to contest for election. Okay, because they were considered not fit to hold public office. They were also not allowed to go into certain professions because it was believed that they were incapable of performing in such jobs. However, through agitations over the years, laws were enacted to make sex discrimination unlawful. And one of them, the first sex discrimination law was the Sex Disqualification Removal Act of 1919, which made it unlawful to disqualify anyone based on their sex. However, despite this, women still faced discrimination. So the discrimination took a different tone from having them banned to going into certain professions. So what happened was that higher standards, for gaining admission into certain professions, say for instance, the medical schools, they had a higher standard set for women or rather for female applicants that were set for male applicants. So women were not given a fair chance to enter into medical schools. And instead of giving them the same standard so that they could gain admission into those schools, the government instead, went abroad to recruit doctors, from overseas. Okay, so women were, they were employed in jobs, such as caring and nursing, cooking, and these jobs were regarded as women's jobs because they were extensions of their traditional roles. All right, and some of these roles were usually located at the bottom of the labor market. All right, so you would usually find women in semi-skilled or unskilled skilled jobs. All right, so women, they clamored for equal rights. All right, but during the debate, in Parliament, trying to have these laws passed, some MPs argued that that women should remain in traditional domestic roles, such as in the food industries, clothing or nursing, because it was believed that they were incapable of carrying out functions, in industries that you find men in. So, for instance, engineering industries, they felt that women, could not work in such professions. Okay. Then they also put forth some argument that that women actually were the ones that chose not to compete with men, because that they knew that they were incapable of doing such jobs. And then argue that they also argue that men and women, should perform different roles, because of their biological differences. All right. So with time, laws were passed, okay, and women, could go into some occupations, so they were then allowed to go into them, to hold positions in civil offices or judicial offices. They were also allowed to teach in universities. Um, but still, they still continue to face discrimination, okay, because the discrimination again took on a different tone. So even though they were now allowed to go into those professions, they were paid less than men, even though they did the same jobs as men. All right, so the women's movement, pushed for equal pay, and most times, they were met with resistance. Okay, so there was actually a case, Robert and Hopwood, where it was held that paying women the same rate as men was acting unlawful. So over the years, equal pay was introduced, in the civil service and in the public sector. And then later on, the Equal Pay Act of 1970 was passed in, 1970, which came into force in 1975. And then in that same year, the Sex Discrimination Act was passed, okay? So the Sex Discrimination had more general principles of equal treatment, which was introduced in education, employment, and provision of services. All right, so that Sex Discrimination Act, with the other anti-discrimination laws, like the Race Relations Act, the Disability Discrimination Act, and the rest of them, they were all then now merged into what we have now. So that's the Equality Act of 2010. All right, so this is kind of a brief history of the origin of sex discrimination and the laws. Okay, and so right now, I want us to now go on and look at some of the theories behind sex discrimination, or gender inequality. Okay, so gender classification. Right, so what is sex and what is gender? Right, are there any distinction between sex and gender? All right, so let's see what some the theorists in this area have to say. Right, so we have West and Zimmerman, who in their study they defined sex as a determination made through the application of the socially agreed upon biological criteria for classifying persons as females or males. Okay, so in other words, a person is born, and we as a society would look at the physical or biological characteristics of that person. Okay, so if this person or this baby has a certain type of genitalia or biological functions, then we'll call her a female, right? But if they have a different type of genitalia or biological functions from the female, we call him a male. All right, so sex is a determination that society makes by looking at the biological functions of a person, and then they place them in a sex category. All right, so when one is placed in a sex category, society would then, need to find ways to make it easy to identify, this person. So obviously, if a baby is born and brought home and we come to visit the baby, we're not going to strip the baby to see what's down there to decide whether the person is a boy or a girl. All right, so we have to find ways, to display that sex category. Like where I'm from, right? Once a girl is born, before leaving the hospital, right, they put an earring in, and that's how people would identify, that a person has had a baby girl. All right. So if he doesn't have an earring, then we know it's a boy. All right. So we come up with these, ways to display a sex category. I'm sure you'll be familiar with pink and blue, for boys and girls. Okay. So West and Zimmerman, they go on to, to define gender. And they say gender is the activity of managing situated conduct in light of normative conceptions of attitudes and activities appropriate for one's sex category. All right, so with this sex categorization that has already been carried out, all right, the society then comes up with how it thinks that these groups should behave and the things that they should do. Then it starts to ascribe activities to them and telling them how to behave. All right, so this is the difference between sex and gender. All right, so though sometimes, they are, sort of used interchangeably. All right, then Eka goes on to say that, that gender is a tool used by society to establish social differences between men and women in relation to their biological differences. All right, so society has now identified the distinction between men and women, and then they go on to create differences between them in society. Okay, and then West and Zimmerman, they called this doing gender. All right, and they said that the creation of these differences are not important, they are not natural or biological. All right, so these gender differences that society creates is just a way to reinforce the importance of gender and as a way to create domination of men over women. Okay, right. So in order to continue to have men dominate women, the society has to come, has to make it look natural. That's why you hear things like, that's how we do it, or it's our culture, or that's how we're created. You hear these sort of things. Okay, so this is why society continues to reinforce the importance of gender and make it appear natural, rather than a product of, cultural manipulations, that were brought about, by human decisions. All right, so to continue to maintain this, the society continues to view gender differences as fundamental and ascribe different roles and responsibilities to the different genders. With women having women's roles and men having men's roles. Okay, so this is what Goffman, had to say. And then Delphi said that, that the biological differences are not a valid reason to have a division of labor between the sexes. Okay, but as a way, to keep women in their place. Okay, so there were times, when some professions, say for instance in the medical field or the legal field, were reserved for men. Okay, so I just said that, those were reserved for men, and some of the reasons were that women were incapable of doing those jobs. But now we know that these are fallacies. Okay, it means that, if we were back in the day, then I wouldn't have this job. I wouldn't be a lawyer or a barrister. Okay, and my sister, who is a medical doctor, would not be allowed to do that. So all these are just societal creations based on wrong perceptions. Okay, West and Zimmerman went on to say that roles are learned and enacted through socialization, and that they are not determined by biological makeup. All right, so when we talk of socialization, socialization is a process of learning, through observation and interaction, with our environment. All right, so these gender roles are not inbuilt. Okay, we learn it through socialization. So it's not because I'm a woman or a girl that I know how to cook. I was not born with cooking skills. Okay, I was taught how to cook. So, and then girls grow up, seeing their mothers cooking and looking after the family. And by observing that, they see it as normal. and that's the way they should be, and they grow up wanting to cook and look after their own families. Then you see the boys will observe their fathers going out to work, and they are told that this is the way a man does it. Okay, so they grow up wanting to do the same. All right, so we learn these by observing the world around us. Okay, and then West and Zimmerman also went on to say that roles should not have master identities, all right, but that they should have situated identities. All right, so in other words, we should not ascribe roles to a particular gender, but to particular situations. All right, so if a woman can go out and work to earn money, and the man can stay home and cook and look after the family, then that's fine. Okay, so it should be whoever that is capable of doing it that should do it, and not that it must be a particular gender. All right, so however, we have some sociologists that believe that there should be no crossing between gender roles, that there should be men's roles and, there should be women's roles. Then Eka went on to say that that society relies on differences in individuals, to create a domination by portraying men as stronger beings, thereby placed them in top positions. Okay, so power is then distributed in society based on the perception of gender. All right, so the society then, went further to make, so this was Eka talking, saying again that, the society, made a distinction between production and reproduction. Okay, so production being production of wealth, then reproduction being reproduction of offspring. All right, so it made production of wealth to be viewed as important, and then reproduction of offspring, to be viewed as less important. Okay, but we know that's not true. Okay, they are both equally important. For society to, for us to keep the society going, women need to reproduce. Okay, then Uchem, she introduced another element to this. All right, so she said that the church and its teachings are used as additional tool for female subordination. Then religion, has acted as an effective tool to subordinate women in African societies. And then, in addition to religion, culture is also used in African societies as a tool to subjugate women, okay? And it is used to intimidate them, get them to submit, and also ensure compliance. Okay, so culture is used as a way to sort of threaten women. They could threaten them with, ostracization, or whatever threats that they have, to get them, to put them in their place and get them to comply. Okay, so they are told, a woman's place, is in the kitchen. Then we have Makama, who said that patriarchy is also used in African societies. Okay, so patriarchy is the the male headship model that we have, existing in the families and church. Okay, so as the man being the head of either the family or the church. All right, so with this, men are conditioned to expect women to serve them. All right, so this discrimination then is reinforced over and over, and in schools and churches, through the use of books and teaching method. Okay, so I can actually go on forever with this, okay, but I have to stop, with this here on gender classification, so that we can go on and look at other theories. All right, so we have the feminist theories. Okay, so right, so the body of feminist theories believe that women are treated differently in society, when compared to men. All right, so they highlight the structural inequalities that exist between men and women. okay, and the problems that women face in society, because of the dominant male structures that exist. All right, so we will briefly look at two of the feminist theories. So we'll be looking at the liberal feminism and radical feminism. All right, so liberal feminism believe that women are equal to men and should be entitled to equal legal and political standing, okay, as well as economic and social opportunities. All right, so they believe that men and women have equal reasoning, okay? They reason alike, they have the same brain capacity and then also emotional capacity. Therefore, people's abilities should not be determined by their bodily functions. And then they advocate for equality of opportunity and equality of treatment, and believe that each person should be valued as a human being. Okay, they also advocate that sex discrimination should be eliminated and that women should be given opportunities to go into male-dominated jobs. People should be allowed to, work in whatever job they qualify in or want to do. Okay, so there should be nothing like, a man should be the only one maybe driving trucks or providing for the family, okay, and that the woman should be the only one that is looking after the family or maybe work as a nurse, okay. A man and a woman, either of them, can do that if they qualify to do it and they want to do it, okay. So they should be allowed to make that choice. Okay, so they believe, so liberal and feminists believe in using education to achieve and maintain an equal society. And then central to their idea of equality of opportunity is that women are not sources of pleasure and provider of services for men, okay, but that they are valuable in themselves as individuals and therefore should be given equal treatment. Okay, and then we look at radical feminism. Okay, so so this looks um, at the root of a women's oppression. Okay, to find strategies, for ending it. They believe that sexism is the root of a women's oppression, and this brings about, other forms of oppression that exist, such as racism, class hatred, and economic exploitation. They also believe that that patriarchy is used to oppress and dominate women, and then that to achieve equality, that there needs to be a change, in our consciousness and the views about women. Okay, so if we need to change any of this, we have to have a change in our mindset and what we think, women are. Okay, they also think that a woman, has a right to be autonomous and not be subordinated using patriarchal structures, such as law, religion, or the family. Okay, so our social existence and our worldview are created by society, okay, and not by nature. Okay, so we see things like, families being structured in such a way that women's reproductive capacity, is used as a means to domestically exploit her, all right, making her vulnerable and economically dependent. All right, so the fact that a woman bears children does not mean that she cannot have dreams or pursue a career. Okay, it does not mean that she cannot work or earn a living, or that she has to be dependent on her husband, thereby making her vulnerable to whatever he decides to do to her. All right, so a woman's reproductive capacity should not be a tool to exploit her. Okay, right. So radical feminists believe that socialization, is used to maintain patriarchy and oppressive systems because, children are taught, this is the way we are, okay, or men should be in positions of power, or women should be subordinate, should be in subordinate positions. Okay, so children learn this and they pass it on from generations to generations. All right, so these are some of the things, some of the theorists in this area have written. Please remind me, to put up a list of these articles here, so that you can have them if you want them. Okay, we go on to look at life course theory. Okay, this is also known as a life course perspective. Okay, so these people or these theorists believe that gender inequality, stems from various factors acting together to shape a person's life. All right, so a person's characteristic and environment play an important role in shaping who they are and how they behave. Right? So I have my personal characteristics, and of course, where I grew up and where I live currently, and the things in my environment. Okay, so all these obviously will build up to shape, who I am today. All right, so life course theorists, they look at historical time, social location, okay, so where a person is, their lived experiences, their culture, their social institutions as determining factors that shape, an individual's lives. We have, one of the theorists, Stockelberger, who said that, why we have a problem addressing inequality is because, she says it's because we don't address gender issues properly. All right, she said it, the way that we view inequality is that we take a snapshot of a woman's condition at a point in time and then compare it to women's condition and to men's condition. Okay, so for instance, we can say, what's the problem right now? All right. Okay, so women are not getting into top positions. All right, and then we take a snapshot of it at this point in time and compare it to men. All right, but we ignore every other thing from her past and in her environment that has built into her being at that point in time. Okay, so Stoja Beja, she said that doing it that way ignores inequality women face in different stages of their lives. All right, and this inequality in different stages, they obviously accumulate and shape who a person is. Then we have Bannock, who says that childhood inequalities contribute to inequalities women face later in life. All right, because as a child, we learn behaviors that were introduced and instilled in us, and then we grow up to accept these as normal. Bannock highlighted cultural, familial, factors, and as a way that, as things that explain inequality. Then under cultural explanations, she talked about, certain societies where they have son preference, okay, and because of that, they emphasize the ideology of male superiority. Okay, so imagine this, obviously something like this where a society says that, that men are superior. This will affect a girl child when she's growing up. Okay, she will grow up to have a feeling of inferiority. All right, so this would affect her, as an adult, because she's had this concept as a child that she's inferior. So she'll grow up to think that same way. Then she also had familial explanations. Here she talked about girls being treated as outsiders, okay, and they're not allowed to inherit from their families. And the families are also reluctant to spend resources training them, because they believe that, they will eventually belong to another family. All right, then we had Shun, who talks about early experiences in the family and the school, as well as multi sociocultural factors that shape a person's self concepts. Okay, so that's their belief in who they are. the choices that they make, and the behaviors which impact on their experience and perceptions. And then she says that various factors over time prime women to make different career choices and have different career aspirations from men. All right, so that's why you find some women prioritizing family over career, while others, it's the other way around. All right, so life course theories, they recommend that in hope of addressing a gender inequality, that the focus should be on children. Focus on children, teach them differently, let them understand that these issues are not real, but that they are a creation of society, and then stop it from being reinforced, enhanced, and passed on to the next generation. Okay, so the next one is a theory of gendered organization. Okay, so Joan Aker propounded this theory. She's of the view that organizations are organized along the lines of gender. Right, so roles are shared based on gender classification, with men working outside the homes and women looking after the children. And then when women, ventured out, measures were put in place to exclude them, from the organization. It is believed that organizations are, structured to favor and represent the interest of men. Okay, so organizations were viewed as a male domain, and the women were restricted from certain functions and attaining certain positions, in the organization. So this is known as, the glass ceiling concept. All right. So she said that the way job evaluations are done affect women negatively. Because when jobs are created, it is created in an abstract manner without anybody in mind to fill that job. All right, so roles and responsibilities are assigned to the job. Okay, so the people creating those jobs may decide, okay, we want somebody that can, maybe work 60 hours a week, or we want the person to resume, in New York tomorrow, and then next week we want them in Japan, or we want them wherever we want them, and they will be there. They must report there. All right. So they create this job like this, without taking into consideration, external factors that may affect the worker. All right. So when this happens, all right, you see that it would affect women because they are the ones that give birth. Okay. And remember, we said earlier on that the society expects them to look after the children. All right. So a woman with a child, okay, who the society expects to look after the children it's not possible for her, at the snap of finger for her to get up and report to New York tomorrow. All right. So such abstract jobs, will be suitable for a universal individual, who is able to shed all outside influences and only live for the job. Then we have Gerardi and Poggio, who believe that a man or a woman can succeed in that job, okay? In that abstract job, a man and a woman can succeed if they shared outside their responsibilities in favor of that job, okay? However, that this would they will have a different implications for men and women, all right? So for a man, it would only affect his time with his family, okay? Because he's going to have a wife at home who is taking care of the home front and taking care of the children. But for a woman, it will mean a choice between a family life and her job. All right. So according to Aker, this also has a further impact on women, because organization views those who can separate their family life from their work life as being better suited, for responsibility and authority. All right, so this would affect women from getting into senior management roles because, not many women will be able to do this, okay, because they have their children and, they are unable to separate both. Okay, so yeah, so it has been found that the inequality relating to childcare and domestic work is the main obstacle to women's participation in work. Straub said that gender is the barrier to female progression into senior management positions. Because of the differences, in their work life and their family lives, as compared to that of a woman. And then women have been blamed, for lack of ambition to get to the top of the organizations. Yet organizations fail to bring human production into the scope of into the scope of the organization. We see the government really trying, putting in effort to recruit women to top positions, but this consistently fail because the organizations, they do not question or change the way or notions about the appropriate way to accomplish work. All right, so for many years, women have said, we don't have to be in the office to work. We don't have to be in the office full time to work full time. Okay, so they have asked, sort of find ways, different ways to do work. But you hear things like, no, this is how we do it. All right, but now we can see COVID has happened, okay, and it has proven that we do not need to be in the office full time to work full time. All right, next month is going to be 1 year that I stepped foot in my office. All right, so these inequality issues can be changed. Okay, we just need to work together and find ways to to resolve it. Okay, so organizations, they're advised to view gender differently and accommodate differences, all right, bearing in mind, the dominant male nature of society. Okay, so we have things like caring responsibilities, it needs to be balanced, okay, between men and women, okay, so that equality can be, achieved, right? The government is trying to do their bit. If you guys remember from our employment law, we looked at shared parental leave regulations of 2014, where a man and a woman can decide to share their leave. Okay, so these are ways, these things can be done. Okay, so we just all need to come together and try to figure out, how to achieve it. Okay, so this is why gender inequality still persists. We refuse to change the way we do things, okay, or even change our perceptions. Okay, we have laws now. Okay, the laws are helping, but we still need to do a lot more. We still need to come together, to put our heads together to get these issues resolved. All right, so I'm going to just quickly run through some figures. Okay, I'm kind of conscious that I've spent a lot of time now on this. All right, so like I said, we have laws now and they have been extended to men. Okay, so the equality law is not just women that it protects, it also protects men. All right, and gender inequality, with the data I'm going to show now, it has an impact in different areas of women's life. Okay, so we look at gender pay gap. Okay, so as I said, society expects women, to look after children. So because of that, women are less likely than men to be working full time. Okay, and part-time jobs are often, low paid. All right, so this contributes to gender pay gaps that exist at all levels and at all stages. We have that from statistics from the Office of the National Statistics, which puts this from 2016. It puts a gender pay gap for full-time employees between men and women at 9.4%. Okay, so that's the difference full-time employees, men and women are earning, 9.4%. And then when you now put all employees together, including part-time workers, the difference is 18.1%. Okay, so a man is earning 18.1% more than a woman. Okay. So this survey started in 1997. At that point, the gap was at 27.5%. Then we had a Fawcett Society, which estimates that it will take us 62 years, at the rate that we are going to close that gender pay gap. All right, and then this figure does not include extremes like the city, all right, where men are paid bonuses, 5 times more than women. Okay, so these are, the way all these inequality impact on women. Then we also have women on boards. Okay, so women they are also disadvantaged on the board of companies. There's a report from the Department of Business Innovation and Skills, which showed that in 2011, only 12.5% of board positions in FTSE 100 companies, 100 companies were held by women. 12.5% of women in board positions were in board positions. Okay, and then by October 2015, the figure had reached 26.1%. Okay, but out of that, 3% were board chairs and 5% were chief executives. Okay, women are underrepresented in managerial jobs compared to their share of the overall employment. Okay, so they stand at 71.4% compared to 80.3% of men. Okay, climbing up an organizational hierarchy, you find out that the proportion of women managers diminish sharply. Okay, so this corresponds to the age, when women start having children, and then they start dropping off the labor market. All right, so women they are outnumbered by men in positions of power and authority. Okay, positions of high status and high incomes. So I mean, from this figure, we can see that measures need to be put in place, to keep women in the labor market, during their reproductive period. All right. So there were some reasons given for, why women, don't remain in the labor market. So they said there's a lack of a representation of bias, and there's a prejudice. Lack of representation. There are bias, there's a prejudice, there's a few opportunities for career advancement or professional development, lack of encouragement, lack of support, men only recruit men or people that look like them, so these were reasons that were given, for them not getting to the top. Then in 2012, the European Commission proposed a quota of 40% representation of women, by 2020. All right, so some countries have met that. We have Norway, Spain, Ireland, Finland, that have met this quota. Right, so they used different incentives to do that. Okay, so I think is it Norway or one of them, used a quota system. All right, so not everybody agrees with a quota system because that's it can be classed as discriminatory and not a positive action. Okay, and then we have older women. Okay, so obviously these issues that's started from when the person was a girl and growing up and getting older would impact on older women. Okay, so older women are found to work part-time and mostly on a temporary contracts. All right, so they are more likely than men to play a dual role of working and caring. All right, so you find the older women, they suffer age and sex discrimination, okay, separately or combined. Okay, so that's intersectionality. I mentioned it in one of the lectures. All right, so have a look at this and that case, Miriam O'Reilly against the BBC, and see how about how intersectionality plays. The disadvantage that's suffered by older women in employment is as a result of their life course. Okay, so they were excluded from the labor market. Okay, some of them were having children, some of them were caring for their children, some of them were also caring for their older relatives. Okay, and you find them because they do all this caring job, looking after the family, they also work part-time. Okay, and then by doing that, they're making fewer contributions into their pension. Okay, so the discrimination that they have faced is due to past discrimination that excluded them from the labor market, and then the caring responsibilities. Okay, so which again excludes them from making pension contributions. All right, so you find out that older women, they are often poorer than older men. Okay, because you find them receiving a low pension, right? Because they haven't made enough paid enough pension into their pot. Okay, and then they're also mostly dependent on their male partners. Okay, and they also took career breaks to care for their children. Okay, so all this then builds up into the income that a woman earns in their lifetime. Okay, so during their lifetime, a woman earns £250,000 less than a man. Okay, and then their income at retirement is that is a 57% of a man's income. Okay, so this is because of the overall employment, meant fewer opportunities to accrue pension for them. Okay, so yeah, just quickly move on to the next one, so can finish up. All right, so the EU directives. I have already had a lecture on this, so I'll just kind of quickly just gloss over it. All right, so I did mention about international laws allowing for special measures to be adopted, to promote equality between men and women. Okay, so we have a number of EU directives, that ensures equal treatment and equal opportunities between men and women. All right, so I covered this in the topic sources of law. Okay, so please, make a reference to that law. Or I have put some of these directives and then the cases on here so that you can go and have a look at them. All right, so these cases they are UK cases that are relevant to positive action, which we have already discussed. Okay. All right, so the Equality Act. Okay, so this makes sex discrimination unlawful. Okay, again, I have already explained this. This slide actually is from the slide that I used for positive action. Okay, so please refer to that lecture because I explained that in more detail. But however, Section 159 of the Equality Act allows an employer to treat the disadvantaged more favorably in connection with recruitment. Okay, but only where a candidate is as qualified as another, there is no policy for automatic favoring, and the favorable treatment is proportionate. Okay, so if these conditions are met, then the tie break may be resolved in favor of the candidate. All right, so in other words, I'm applying this to women. Okay, so if they meet this and there's a tie break between them and a woman and a man, then the employer is allowed to treat them more favorably. Okay, so the cases that's just on the slide before, the EU cases, they're actually dealing with this. Okay, so please go read those cases, for more detail. Okay, and then this is it for sex discrimination or gender inequality. All right, so these are some of the theories surrounding these issues and why discrimination persists. Okay, so this will help you, when you look at the law, you understand why there has to be a law in place to protect women. Okay, so though the law, extends to men as well. All right, so right, yeah, so that's why there is a discrimination, it persists, and something needs to be done to put an end to it. It's not that women are irrational beings, it's not they are less smart or less smarter than men, It's not that they are incapable of doing any job. Okay, women can do anything that they want to do, and it should not be up to society to restrict them. Okay, now we can see how over the years how the these discriminatory issues took on different forms. Okay, before they were restricted, they were banned from going into certain professions, and then they were allowed, but then they were given higher standards to get in. Okay, which again stopped them from getting in. Okay, then that was allowed again. That was removed, and then they were being paid less. Okay, so at each point in time, it took on a different element. Okay, so now currently, the main thing that women are facing now as a discriminatory issue in employment or in progressing in their career is the issue of childcare. It's not that women don't want to go back to work when they, have babies. Okay, but it can be expensive to pay for childcare. Okay, and then this care is left solely to them. Okay, so we need to come together, how to find ways to resolve it. The man also should also be responsible in taking care of the child. So things should be balanced out, to find ways to help women to get back into the labor market and progress in their career. Because if somebody has spent, years in a maybe studying or learning a trade or something, they should be fulfilled, in doing that, and we should not have the obstacles stopping them from getting into where they wish to be. All right, so so I think I'll stop this here now. Okay, and I hope to see you soon in the seminar. Bye.